purple beam cut through the night sky like a knife through paper. Kyle Bennett ran across the settlement as alarms blared from every building. Behind him, the peaceful colony of New Portland burned. The Zyraxian warship hung in the air above them, massive and dark, blocking out the stars. "Get to the shelters," Kyle shouted at the families running past him. Children cried in their parents' arms. Old people stumbled on the broken ground. Everything they had built over 5 years was falling apart in minutes. Maria Hoffman met him at the command center. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady as she worked the controls. "Our shields are down. Weapons are offline. They hit us with some kind of pulse weapon. We have nothing left to fight with." Kyle looked at the screens. The alien ship was 10 times bigger than anything humans had in this sector. Its weapons could level the entire colony in seconds. But they weren't shooting to kill. They were shooting to disable. That meant they wanted something. "How long until help arrives?" he asked. Maria checked the communications log. "The distress signal went out 3 minutes ago. Earth is 6 days away at maximum speed. The nearest military outpost is 4 days. 4 days. They had to survive 4 days. The ground shook as the alien ship landed outside the colony walls. Kyle grabbed the edge of the console to keep from falling. Through the windows, he could see the landing ramp extending from the ship's belly. Shadows moved inside, big shadows, too many to count. "Everyone to the central square," Kyle ordered. "Tell them to bring nothing but what they can carry. No weapons. We can't fight these things." The colonists gathered in the square as the aliens marched through the settlement. Kyle had seen pictures of Zyraxians before, but nothing prepared him for seeing them in person. They stood 8 feet tall on 2 thick legs, 4 arms extended from their torso, each one holding a different weapon. Their skin was covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness. The aliens moved with purpose, checking every building, every corner, every hiding spot. They found everyone. Within an hour, all 300 colonists stood in the square surrounded by armed soldiers. Kyle stood at the front with the other leaders. He refused to kneel even when a Zyraxian pressed a weapon against his back. A figure walked down the ramp of the command ship. This one was different from the soldiers. Its scales were lighter, almost silver, and it wore something that looked like armor made from living metal. A device hung around its neck, blinking with blue lights. "I am Vexthor," the alien said. The device translated its words into perfect English. "This colony now belongs to the Zyraxian Empire. You will work in the mines beneath this moon. You will extract the crystals we need. You will obey or you will die. These are your only choices." An old woman named Patricia Moore stepped forward. She had been one of the first settlers, had helped terraform the barren moon into something humans could live on. Her voice shook, but she stood straight. "The Galactic Council has laws against this. You cannot enslave registered species. We are protected." Vexthor made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "The Council is weak. They make laws but cannot enforce them. Your species is weak. You have been in space for only 200 years. You have no real fleet. You have no powerful allies. Your government will file complaints and do nothing. This is how the galaxy works. The strong take what they want from the weak." Kyle felt rage burning in his chest, but he kept his face calm. The alien was right about one thing. Earth had no fleet in this sector. The nearest ships were days away. By the time help arrived, the Zyraxians could take what they wanted and leave. But Vexthor was wrong about something important. He didn't understand humans. He didn't know about the one rule that every human child learned from birth: never leave your people behind, not ever. Not for any reason, the message had already been sent. Someone would come. They always came. The aliens separated the colonists into groups. The strong ones would work in the mines. The educated ones would operate the machinery. The children and elderly would stay in the settlement under guard. Families were torn apart. People cried out for each other, but the Zyraxians didn't care. Kyle was pushed into the mining group along with 50 other men and women. They were marched to the mine entrance on the edge of the settlement. The tunnel went deep into the moon's crust, dark and cold. The Zyraxians gave them tools and simple instructions. Dig, find crystals, bring them to the surface. Work for 12 hours, rest for 6. Work again, no protective suits, no safety equipment, no medical care. Kyle looked at the others in his group. He saw fear in their eyes, but also something else: determination, anger, hope. They were all thinking the same thing. "Hold on, survive, help is coming." The first shift was brutal. The air in the mine was thin and filled with dust. The crystals they were looking for grew in veins along the rock walls. Sharp edges cut through gloves and clothing. The temperature dropped so low that their breath came out in clouds. People stumbled. People fell. The Xeraxian guards watched without emotion. When someone collapsed, they were dragged to the side and left there. Kyle worked next to a young man named Chris Baker. Chris had been a teacher before coming to New Portland. His hands bled from gripping the mining tools. "They're going to work us to death," Chris whispered. "Even if help comes, we might not last long enough." "We'll last," Kyle said. "We just need to be smart about it. Pace yourself. Help the person next to you. Share water, share food. We survive together or not at all." Word spread through the workers. They started helping each other. When someone grew too weak to continue, others would cover for them. When the guards weren't looking, they shared rations. They took turns resting. They became a team instead of individuals. Above ground, Patricia Moore organized the people left in the settlement. She had the children gather food from the storage buildings before the aliens could claim it all. She had the doctors set up a hidden medical station in one of the houses. She made sure everyone knew the plan. Stay alive, stay together, wait for rescue. On the third day, Vexthor visited the mines. He walked through the tunnels, inspecting the work. The piles of crystals were growing, but not fast enough for his liking. He stopped in front of Kyle. "Your people are slow," Vexthor said. "We expected better production. Perhaps we need to provide motivation." He gestured to his guards. They grabbed Chris Baker and dragged him to the center of the tunnel. Vexthor raised one of his weapons. "Work harder or watch your companions die." Kyle stepped forward. "Wait, we'll work faster. Just give us better tools. Better air filters. We can barely breathe down here." Vexthor considered this. "Very well. You have 1 day to double production. If you fail, one of you dies every hour until output increases." The alien left. The workers looked at each other with desperate eyes. They couldn't double production. It was impossible. But they had to try. Kyle gathered everyone during the rest period. "Listen carefully. Help is coming. I know it is. We just need to buy time. We'll do what we can, but we don't kill ourselves for these creatures. We stay alive. That's the priority." He looked up at the tunnel ceiling, toward the stars he couldn't see. Somewhere up there, ships were coming. He had to believe that. Humanity had one absolute rule. Nobody gets left behind. The Xeraxians had made a terrible mistake. They had broken the oldest rule in the galaxy. They had taken humans and assumed no one would care enough to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Christine Harper stood perfectly still as the emergency council meeting erupted around her. Generals shouted. Politicians argued. Diplomats urged caution. She waited until the noise died down, then spoke in a voice that cut through the chaos like ice. 300 of our people are being worked to death in mines on the edge of our territory. Every hour we debate is another hour they suffer. I need 12 ships and full authorization to use whatever force is necessary. That is not a request. The Secretary General of the United Nations leaned forward in his chair. His face was old and tired, but his eyes were sharp. Admiral Harper, the Xeraxian Empire has over 400 warships. They have allies throughout the Outer Rim. If we attack them, we could be starting a war we cannot win. Christine looked at him without blinking. With respect, sir, they already started the war when they took our people. The only question now is whether we fight back or let every other species in the galaxy know that humans can be taken without consequences. What do you think happens to our other colonies if we do nothing? The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. There were 50 human colonies scattered across a dozen star systems. Most of them were lightly defended. If the Xeraxians succeeded with New Portland, others would try the same thing. Humanity would become prey. You have your ships, the Secretary General said quietly. Bring our people home. Christine saluted and left the room. She had been waiting for this moment since the distress call came through 3 days ago. Her crew had been preparing the fleet non-stop. Now they had permission to act. The UNS Vigilant waited in orbit above Earth, surrounded by 11 other warships. They were not the biggest ships in the human fleet, but they were the fastest. Speed mattered more than firepower for this mission. Every hour counted. Christine walked onto the bridge and every officer stood at attention. She had served in the Space Command for 30 years. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt. She had negotiated peace treaties with hostile species. She had trained for every possible scenario. But this was different. This was personal. "Status report," she ordered as she took her seat in the command chair. Peter Hayes, her navigation officer, pulled up a star chart on the main screen. "We are ready to jump on your command, Admiral. The route to New Portland will take us through neutral space. We should arrive in approximately 18 hours at maximum speed." "Any sign of Zyraxian activity along the route?" "Negative. Their fleet is concentrated in their home systems. Intelligence suggests they have only one warship at New Portland." "The one that took the colony," Christine nodded. "One ship, that was good." But she knew the Zyraxians would not give up their prize easily. They would fight. People would die. She accepted that. What mattered was making sure the right people died. "Take us to jump speed," she ordered. "All ships follow our lead. And send a message to the Galactic Council. Inform them that we are invoking Article 7 of the Sentient Rights Charter. We are responding to an illegal enslavement of registered citizens with appropriate military force." The message was sent. Within minutes, it would reach every government in the galaxy. Some would approve. Some would condemn. Christine didn't care about their opinions. She cared about her people trapped on that moon. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed. Space twisted around them as they entered hyperspace. The journey would take 18 hours. Christine used that time to meet with her officers and plan the assault. Lucas Grant commanded the tactical division. He was younger than most officers at his rank, but he had earned his position through skill, not politics. He spread holographic maps across the war room table showing New Portland and the surrounding space. The Zyraxian warship is in low orbit above the colony. They have ground forces at the settlement and in the mines. Our scouts estimate between 200 and 300 soldiers plus support personnel. The ship itself has heavy shields and plasma cannons. We cannot destroy it quickly without risking damage to the colony below. "We don't need to destroy it," Christine said. "We need to disable it and force a surrender." "What about their communication systems?" Lucas highlighted several points on the ship's hull. "These are their primary and secondary comm arrays. If we can take those out, they cannot call for reinforcements. We hit them fast before they know we are coming." Christine studied the map. "And the ground forces." "That is where Captain Wright comes in." Danny Wright entered the war room still wearing his combat armor. He commanded the Marine Division, 200 of the best soldiers humanity could produce. His face was hard and his eyes were cold. He had fought in a dozen boarding actions and planetary assaults. He knew what needed to be done. "My teams will drop in 6 different locations around the colony," Danny said, pointing at the map. "Primary objective is civilian extraction. We get our people out first. Secondary objective is neutralizing the enemy ground forces. We go in hard and we go in fast. No mercy for anyone who stands between us and our people." Christine looked at him carefully. "These are prisoners of war, Captain. They get treated according to law once they surrender. And if they don't surrender, then you do what is necessary to protect our civilians." Danny nodded. That was all the authorization he needed. The hours passed slowly. Christine walked through the ship, checking on her crew. In the hangar bay, Marines loaded weapons and checked armor. In engineering, technicians made final adjustments to the engines. In medical, doctors prepared for casualties. Everyone knew their role. Everyone was ready. 16 hours into the journey, new intelligence arrived from Earth. 7 more human colonies had been attacked by Zyraxian forces in the past week. The attacks were coordinated. This was not random piracy. This was a calculated test of human resolve. Christine called another meeting with her senior staff. "The Zyraxians are testing us. They want to know if we will fight to protect our colonies. This is our chance to send a message, not just to them but to every species watching. You do not touch human citizens. Not ever. What if they have allies waiting in the sector?" Lucas asked. "This could be a trap. Then we spring the trap and deal with whatever comes. We are not leaving our people behind. That is not negotiable." The officers returned to their stations. Christine sat alone in her ready room, looking at files on each of the colonists at New Portland. 300 faces, 300 stories, farmers and teachers, engineers and artists, children who had never seen Earth. They were all counting on her. She would not let them down. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Portland system. Sensors immediately began scanning for threats. The Zyraxian warship was exactly where intelligence said it would be, hanging in orbit above the moon. No other ships were present, no traps, No reinforcements. All ships to battle stations, Christine ordered. Weapons free. Execute attack pattern Delta on my mark. The 12 human warships moved into position. They spread out in a wide formation, surrounding the Xeraxian vessel. The alien ship's sensors finally detected them, but it was too late to run. The humans were already in weapons range. Christine opened a communication channel to the enemy ship. Xeraxian vessel, this is Admiral Christine Harper of the United Nations Space Command. You are in violation of Galactic Council law. Release our citizens immediately and surrender your ship. This is your only warning. The response came quickly. Vexthor's face appeared on the screen. His expression was a mix of surprise and anger. You dare threaten us? We have laws of conquest. This territory is ours by right of strength. You have 10 seconds to comply, Christine said calmly. After that, we open fire. Vexthor laughed. You are bluffing. Humans do not start wars. You negotiate. You compromise. You are weak. Christine looked at her tactical officer and nodded. The UNS Vigilant fired first. Railgun rounds crossed the distance between ships in seconds. They hammered into the Xeraxian vessel's shields with the force of small nuclear weapons. The shields flared bright blue and then collapsed under the assault. Before the aliens could recover, the rest of the human fleet opened fire. Missiles streaked through space. Laser beams cut through armor plating. The Xeraxian ship tried to return fire, but the human ships were moving too fast, coordinating their attacks with perfect precision. Every shot was calculated. Every movement was planned. Within 5 minutes, the Xeraxian warship was crippled. Its engines were offline. Its weapons were destroyed. Its communication arrays were scattered debris floating in orbit. The ship hung dead in space, helpless. Cease fire, Christine ordered. Launch ground assault teams. I want our people extracted within the hour. Danny Wright and his Marines were already in their drop pods. The launch tubes opened and the pods shot toward the moon's surface like falling stars. 6 different landing zones, 6 different teams, all with the same mission: bring the colonists home. Kyle heard the explosions before he saw them. The ground beneath his feet shook as something massive hit the surface above the mines. Dust fell from the tunnel ceiling. The Xeraxian guards looked up in confusion, their weapons suddenly pointing away from the human workers. What is happening? One of the aliens growled. Report. Static came through their communication devices. No response. The explosions continued, getting closer. Kyle felt hope surge in his chest for the first time in 4 days. Someone was here. Someone was attacking. The guards started pushing the workers back toward the mine entrance. They were panicking. Kyle had seen enough battles to recognize fear when he saw it. These soldiers had expected an easy assignment. They had expected humans to be soft. They were not prepared for a real fight. A massive boom echoed through the tunnel and the entrance collapsed. Rock and dust filled the air. Kyle covered his mouth and tried to see through the chaos. The Xeraxian guards were shouting at each other in their own language. One of them raised its weapon toward the human workers. Then the wall exploded inward. Armored figures burst through the hole, moving fast and firing weapons with perfect accuracy. The Xeraxian guards didn't stand a chance. They tried to return fire, but the humans were already on them, moving with speed and coordination that seemed impossible in the confined space. Within seconds, all the guards were down. One of the armored soldiers removed their helmet. It was a woman with short black hair and hard eyes. She looked at the workers and her expression softened slightly. United Nations Marines, we are here to get you out. Stay close and follow our instructions. Kyle wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry. Instead, he just nodded and started helping the other workers to their feet. Chris Baker grabbed his arm, his face filled with disbelief. They came. They actually came for us. Of course they did, Kyle said. We are human. We don't leave people behind. The Marines moved through the tunnels with practiced efficiency. They checked every passage, every cave, every hiding spot. They found workers who had collapsed from exhaustion and carried them. They found injured people and provided immediate medical care. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. Above ground, Captain Danny Wright led his team through the colony settlement. His heads-up display showed the positions of all 6 Marine teams. Green dots for humans, red dots for Xeraxians. The green dots were starting to move toward the extraction points. The red dots were either retreating or going dark. Danny's team reached the central square where the elderly and children were being held. Xeraxian guards surrounded the civilians, using them as shields. This was the scenario Danny had trained for. This was why Marines spent years learning precision shooting and close-quarters combat. "Switch to tranquilizer rounds," Danny ordered his squad. "We take them alive if possible, but if they threaten civilians, you are authorized to use lethal force." The Marines spread out, taking positions around the square. The Zyraxians saw them and started shouting. One of them grabbed Patricia Moore and pressed a weapon to her head. The alien's translator device broadcast its words across the square. "Stay back or the old human dies. Retreat to your ships or we will kill them all." Danny stepped into the open, his rifle pointed at the ground. "You have one chance to surrender. Put down your weapons and you will be taken prisoner. You will be treated according to the laws of war. You will live." The Zyraxian holding Patricia laughed. "You will not shoot. You might hit the hostages. Humans are too careful, too afraid of casualties." Danny's expression did not change. "Last warning." The alien tightened its grip on Patricia. That was its mistake. 4 Marines fired simultaneously from 4 different positions. Tranquilizer darts hit the alien in the neck, shoulder, arm, and leg. The creature stumbled and fell, its weapon clattering to the ground. Before the other guards could react, more darts filled the air. Within seconds, every Zyraxian in the square was unconscious. The civilians stared in shock. Then Patricia started clapping. Others joined her. Soon, the entire square was filled with applause and crying and laughter. Danny spoke into his comm. "Sector 5 secure. All hostages safe. Begin evacuation procedures." Transport ships began landing around the colony. They were big cargo vessels converted to carry people instead of supplies. The Marines guided the colonists aboard, checking each person for injuries, making sure families stayed together, keeping count of everyone. Kyle emerged from the mine with the other workers. He saw the transport ships and the Marines and the organized evacuation. He saw Zyraxian prisoners being loaded into separate ships, their hands bound. He saw his people being treated with care and respect. He finally let himself believe it was over. A Marine directed him to one of the transport ships. Inside, medical staff were checking everyone. Kyle found a seat next to Chris. They sat in silence for a moment, too exhausted to speak. "How many did we lose?" Chris finally asked. A medic overheard the question. "From the initial attack, 12 colonists died. From the 4 days in the mines, 9 more. Everyone else is going to make it. You all did well. You kept each other alive, 21 dead." It felt like too many. But Kyle knew it could have been much worse. If the Marines had arrived even a day later, dozens more would have died. Admiral Christine Harper watched the evacuation from the bridge of the Vigilant. Her tactical officer provided constant updates. All 6 Marine teams had completed their objectives. All civilians were accounted for. The Zyraxian ground forces had either surrendered or been neutralized. 0 Marine casualties. What about their ship? Lucas asked. "Still disabled in orbit. We have boarding teams securing it now." The crew surrendered without a fight once they realized they had no options left. Christine opened a channel to the Zyraxian command ship. Vexthor appeared on screen. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone. In its place was fear and confusion. "I do not understand," the alien said. "You mobilized an entire fleet for 300 individuals? The cost of this operation must be enormous. It makes no strategic sense." Christine leaned forward in her chair. "That is your mistake. You think in terms of numbers and resources. You see 300 people and calculate that they are not worth the expense of a rescue mission. But we do not think that way. Those 300 people are our people. Each one matters. Each one is worth whatever it costs to bring them home. But the Galactic Council will punish you for this act of aggression." "Let me explain something to you," Christine said, her voice cold. "We did not commit an act of aggression. We responded to one. You broke laws that have stood for thousands of years. You enslaved a registered species. You assumed we would not respond with force because we prefer diplomacy. That was a miscalculation." She stood up, making sure Vexthor could see her full uniform with all its medals and rank insignia. "Every species in this galaxy will learn what you learned today. Humans can be negotiated with. We can be reasoned with. We prefer peaceful solutions to violent ones. But there is one line you cannot cross. You do not take our people. You do not assume that distance or politics will protect you from consequences. This will mean war," Vexthor said weakly. "No. This will mean respect. Your empire will pay reparations for what you did here. Your military officers will face trial for war crimes, And every other species watching this will understand that humanity keeps its promises. We promise to protect our citizens. We promise to respond to threats. We promise to never leave anyone behind. Those are not empty words. Those are facts. Christine cut the connection. She turned to her crew. Prepare the fleet for return to Earth, and send a message to all human colonies in the sector. Tell them they are safe. Tell them we are watching. Tell them that if anyone threatens them, we will come. The message went out across the galaxy at faster than light speed. Species that had been considering their own attacks on human settlements suddenly reconsidered. Diplomats who had dismissed humanity as naive newcomers started reassessing their positions. Military planners who had counted human ships and judged them insufficient started factoring in new variables. It was not about the number of ships. It was about what those ships would do. It was about a species that valued every individual life. It was about a military that would cross any distance to rescue its people. It was about a government that prioritized its citizens above politics and profit. Down on New Portland, the last transport ship lifted off. The settlement was empty now except for the destruction and the memories. Engineers would come later to rebuild. But for now, the priority was getting everyone home. Kyle sat in the transport as it rose into orbit. Through the window, he could see the Vigilant and the other warships. He could see the captured Zyraxian vessel being towed by smaller ships. He could see home waiting for them among the stars. Chris leaned over to look out the window with him. Do you think they will rebuild the colony? Probably. But I am done with frontier life. I'm going back to Earth. I want to be somewhere with a real military presence. Somewhere safe. Patricia Moore sat across from them. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of hot coffee in her hands. Nowhere is completely safe. But now the galaxy knows the cost of threatening us. That is worth something, she was right. The Zyraxians had learned a lesson that would spread across every civilized world. Humans were... The Galactic Council chamber was built to hold representatives from over 200 different species. Today, every seat was filled. Ambassadors from across the galaxy had gathered for an emergency session. The topic was simple, but the implications were enormous. What should be done about humanity's military action against the Zyraxian Empire? Ambassador Helen Price stood in the center of the massive room. She was a small woman compared to most of the aliens around her, but she carried herself with confidence that made her seem taller. She had served as Earth's representative to the Council for 15 years. She had negotiated trade agreements and peace treaties. She had made friends and allies. Now she would find out if any of that mattered. The Zyraxian ambassador spoke first. He was not Vexthor. That disgraced commander was in custody awaiting trial. This was a senior diplomat named Kratok, and his forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke. The humans committed an unprovoked act of war. They destroyed one of our warships. They killed our soldiers. They have taken our personnel as prisoners. This cannot be tolerated. We demand sanctions. We demand reparations. We demand justice, murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical. Helen waited patiently for her turn to speak. She had prepared for this moment. She knew exactly what she needed to say. The council chairman, a being from the ancient Korthian collective, raised one massive hand for silence. The human ambassador will now present her response. Helen stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The acoustics of the chamber carried her words to every corner of the room. The Zyraxian ambassador speaks of unprovoked acts of war. Let me provide some context. 4 weeks ago, Zyraxian forces attacked a registered human colony. They destroyed our defensive systems. They captured 300 civilians. They forced our people to work in mines without protective equipment. 21 humans died as a direct result of these actions. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. The Zyraxian Empire violated the Treaty of Sentient Rights. They violated the Charter of Colonial Protection. They violated customs that have governed civilized behavior for thousands of years. And when we responded to rescue our people, they claim we are the aggressors. Kratok interrupted. You could have negotiated. You could have filed a formal complaint. You could have pursued diplomatic channels. Instead, you chose violence. Helen turned to face him directly. How long would diplomatic channels have taken? Days, weeks? Our people were dying. Every hour we delayed meant more casualties. We did try to negotiate. Admiral Harper gave your commander a chance to surrender before firing a single shot. He refused. He laughed at us. He said humans were too weak to fight back. The council chairman leaned forward. The question before us is not who started the conflict. The question is whether humanity's response was proportional and justified under council law. An ambassador from the Tellarian Confederation stood. The Tellarians were one of the oldest spacefaring species and their opinions carried weight. I have reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. The humans sent multiple warnings before attacking. They used minimal force necessary to disable the Xeraxian vessel. They took prisoners instead of killing them. They extracted their civilians and left. This does not seem like an act of conquest or revenge. This seems like a rescue operation. Other ambassadors began speaking up. The delegate from the Vosarian Trade Union pointed out that the Xeraxians had attacked 7 different human colonies in 1 week. This was not an isolated incident. It was a coordinated campaign. The representative from the Silicon Collective noted that humanity had filed proper notifications with the Council before launching their operation. They had followed protocols even in the middle of a crisis. Kratok looked around the room with growing alarm. The mood was shifting against his people. He tried a different approach. Even if our actions were wrong, the human response sets a dangerous precedent. They mobilized a military fleet to rescue a small number of civilians. This is economically irrational. It suggests they will use force at the slightest provocation. Helen smiled slightly. You are correct that we mobilized significant resources to rescue 300 people. We would have done the same for 3 people. We would have done the same for 1 person. That is not a threat. That is a promise. Any species that harms human citizens will face immediate and overwhelming response. She turned to address the full council. For decades, humanity has tried to fit into the existing galactic order. We have been patient. We have been diplomatic. We have accepted compromises even when they cost us. But there is one principle we will never compromise on. We protect our people. Always, without exception. The chairman called for order as debates broke out across the chamber. Some species were alarmed by Helen's words. Others seemed impressed. A few looked thoughtful, as if reconsidering their own policies. Finally, the chairman spoke. The council will vote on 3 questions. First, did the Xeraxian Empire violate established law by attacking and enslaving the human colony? Second, was humanity's military response justified under Article 7 of the Sentient Rights Charter? Third, what penalties should be imposed? The voting took 2 hours. When it was done, the results were clear. By a vote of 163 to 37, the council found that the Xeraxians had violated multiple laws. By a vote of 151 to 49, they ruled that humanity's response was justified. The penalties were severe. The Xeraxian Empire would pay massive reparations to the families of those who died. 7 senior military officers would face trial for war crimes. All Xeraxian forces would withdraw from human territory immediately. But the most important change was not written in the official ruling. It was written in the way other ambassadors looked at Helen as she left the chamber. It was written in the private messages she received from species wanting to establish stronger ties with Earth. It was written in the new trade, agreements and defense pacts that would be proposed. In the coming weeks, humanity had changed its position in the galaxy. They were no longer seen as naive newcomers to be taken advantage of. They were seen as a species with both the capability and the willingness to defend their interests. That made them valuable allies and dangerous enemies. Back on Earth, memorial services were held for the 21 colonists who had died. Their names were added to the Wall of the Fallen at the United Nations headquarters. Admiral Christine Harper attended each funeral personally. She met with the families. She listened to their stories. She made sure they knew their loved ones had not been forgotten. Captain Danny Wright and his Marines received medals and commendations. But the real reward was simpler. It was the knowledge that they had done their job. They had brought people home. That was all that mattered. Kyle Bennett and the other survivors from New Portland were given the choice of where to resettle. Some chose to return to Earth. Others wanted to try colony life again, just somewhere safer. The government provided housing, medical care, and counseling. Nobody was left to deal with the trauma alone. Patricia Moore chose to stay involved. She became an advocate for better colonial defenses. She testified before committees. She gave speeches. She made sure that what happened to New Portland would never happen again. 3 months after the incident, the United Nations Space Command announced a major expansion of the fleet. 50 new warships would be constructed over the next 5 years. Defense stations would be built at every human colony. Response times would be cut in half. The message was clear. Humanity was serious about protecting its people. Other species watched these developments with interest. The Tellarian Confederation proposed a mutual defense treaty. The Vosarian Trade Union offered technology sharing agreements. Even some of the species that had voted against humanity in the Council started sending diplomatic feelers, testing whether bridges could be built. The galaxy was adjusting to a new reality. Humans were not going away. They were not going to accept being victimized. They were willing to fight when necessary, but they preferred cooperation. That combination of strength and pragmatism made them the kind of partner many species wanted. Helen sat in her office at the embassy, reviewing the latest proposals from potential allies. Her assistant brought in another stack of messages: trade agreements, cultural exchanges, joint scientific ventures. The opportunities were endless. But she never forgot the core truth that had changed everything. It was not sophisticated diplomacy that had shifted humanity's position in the galaxy. It was not economic power or technological advancement. It was something much simpler. It was 300 people in a mine. It was an admiral who refused to abandon them. It was Marines who risked their lives to bring them home. It was a government that valued every citizen equally. It was a species that meant what they said when they promised to protect their own. The Xeraxians had thought humans were weak because they preferred peace. They had learned the difference between weakness and restraint. They had learned that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who wants to fight, but the one who will fight when they have no other choice. That lesson had cost the Xeraxian Empire dearly. Ships destroyed, soldiers captured, reputation ruined, reparations that would drain their economy for years. 5 years had passed since the liberation of New Portland. The galaxy had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Trade routes that once avoided human space now deliberately passed through it. Species that had dismissed Earth's diplomatic efforts now competed for favorable agreements. Military academies across a dozen worlds added case studies about the New Portland incident to their curriculum. But the most important change was harder to see. It was in the way aliens looked at humans. It was in the careful respect that crept into negotiations. It was in the understanding that humanity's peaceful nature should never be mistaken for weakness. Admiral Christine Harper had retired from active service, but still consulted for the Space Command. She stood on the observation deck of the new Earth Defense Station, looking down at the planet below. Her hair was grayer now. Her face had more lines, but her eyes were still sharp. A young officer approached nervously. "Admiral, there is someone here to see you." "An alien diplomat. He says it is important," Christine turned. "Send him in." The visitor was a Xeraxian, not Vexthor, who was serving a life sentence on a prison world. Not Kratok, who had resigned in disgrace after the council hearings. This was a younger member of their species dressed in simple robes rather than military armor. "My name is Velnir," the alien said through his translator. "I am part of the new civilian government that replaced the old military leadership. I have come to deliver something that is long overdue." He held out a data tablet. Christine took it and read the message displayed on the screen. It was a formal apology from the Xeraxian people, not the government, not the military, the actual citizens. Thousands of signatures from ordinary Xeraxians expressing regret for what their leaders had done. "Why bring this to me?" Christine asked. "Because you were there. You led the fleet that saved your people. You showed restraint when you could have destroyed us completely. Our new leaders want to build a different relationship with humanity, one based on respect and cooperation. But first we needed to acknowledge what we did wrong." Christine looked at the alien for a long moment. "Your old government made a terrible mistake. They thought they understood humans because they had read our history and counted our ships, but they did not understand what drives us. They did not understand that we measure strength differently than you do. We are beginning to understand now," Velnir said. "That is why I am also here to propose a joint venture. Your species and mine working together on a colonization project in neutral space. Equal partners, equal benefits. I will pass this along to the diplomatic corps, but I make no promises. Trust takes time to rebuild. We understand. We are patient. We have learned that lesson at least." After the Xeraxian left, Christine returned to watching Earth. She thought about how far humanity had come. 200 years ago, they were confined to one planet. Now they had colonies on 50 worlds. They had allies and trading partners. They had a military that other species respected, but the core of who they were had not changed. They still valued every individual life. They still refused to leave anyone behind. They still preferred peace but were willing to fight when necessary. Those principles had seemed like weaknesses to species like the Zyraxians. Now they were recognized as strengths. On New Portland, the colony had been completely rebuilt. The settlement was bigger now, better defended, more prosperous. Kyle Bennett had returned to help with the reconstruction. He served as the colony administrator, using his experience to make sure they were prepared for any threat. He stood in the central square where he had once been held prisoner. Now it was a peaceful marketplace where humans and aliens traded goods and stories. A monument stood at the center. It showed a Marine helping a colonist to their feet. The inscription was simple: "Nobody gets left behind." Children played around the monument, not understanding its significance yet. But they would learn. Every human child learned about New Portland in school. They learned about Admiral Harper and Captain Wright. They learned about the principles that defined humanity. They learned that they were part of something bigger than themselves. Chris Baker taught at the colony school. He had stayed on New Portland instead of returning to Earth. He said he wanted to honor the memory of those who died by helping the colony thrive. His students loved him because he made history feel real. He had lived through the most famous rescue mission in human history. He could tell them what it felt like to lose hope and then see Marines bursting through the mine walls. Patricia Moore had passed away 2 years ago. She was buried in the colony cemetery with full honors. Her gravestone read, "She taught us to endure." The colony had established a scholarship in her name for children who wanted to study diplomacy or conflict resolution. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Helen Price prepared for another session. Today's agenda included proposals for stricter enforcement of colonial protection laws. Several species had suggested that the Council create a rapid response force that could intervene in situations like New Portland. Helen supported the idea but insisted that it respect each species' sovereignty. Before the session began, she met with Elder Thorn of the Corthian Collective. The ancient being moved slowly, but his mind was still sharp. He had served on the Council for over a century and had seen countless species rise and fall. "Your people continue to surprise us," Elder Thorn said. 5 years ago, many predicted that humanity would become aggressive after demonstrating their military capability. Instead, you have pursued stronger diplomatic ties and cooperative ventures. "We never wanted to be conquerors," Helen replied. "We just wanted to be left alone to live our lives. When that was not possible, we defended ourselves. Now that others understand our position, we can go back to what we do best: building, creating, cooperating." There is wisdom in that approach. But tell me, what would humanity do if another species repeated the Zyraxian mistake? Would you respond the same way? Helen's expression hardened slightly. "Yes, without hesitation. We have made our position clear. Attack our people and we will come for them. That is not a threat we make lightly. It is a promise we keep absolutely." Elder Thorn nodded slowly. "That is what makes your species unique. Other civilizations make similar promises but qualify them. They calculate costs versus benefits. They consider political implications. Humans simply act. You have turned loyalty into a weapon more powerful than any ship or bomb." "It is not a weapon," Helen said quietly. "It is who we are. We do not know how to be any other way." The council session began. Representatives from dozens of species debated the new proposals. Some wanted stricter rules. Others worried about sovereignty. The discussions would continue for months, maybe years, but progress was being made. The galaxy was slowly becoming a place where laws meant something, where the strong could not simply prey on the weak. Much of that progress came from the example humanity had set. They had shown that it was possible to be both peaceful and strong. They had demonstrated that protecting your people did not require conquering others. They had proven that principles could be as powerful as weapons. In military academies across the galaxy, instructors taught the lessons of New Portland. They analyzed Admiral Harper's strategy. They studied Captain Wright's tactics. They examined the decision-making process that led to the rescue mission. But the most important lesson was not about military science, it was about understanding your opponent's values. The Zyraxians had failed because they judged humanity by their own standards. They saw a species that preferred diplomacy and assumed it meant weakness. They counted ships and soldiers and thought they had measured human capability. They were wrong because they did not understand what truly motivated humans. A species driven by profit can be bought. A species driven by honor can be shamed. A species driven by survival can be threatened. But what do you do with a species driven by loyalty? How do you negotiate with people who will pay any price to protect their own? How do you intimidate someone who sees 300 civilians as worth more than an entire fleet? You cannot. You can only respect them or face the consequences. This understanding spread across the galaxy. It showed up in trade negotiations where partners realized that humans would honor their agreements even when it cost them. It appeared in military planning where potential enemies factored in humanity's absolute commitment to defending their territory. It influenced diplomatic relations where other species learned that humans meant what they said. The old rule had been proven true. Do not mess with humans. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the oldest, but because they were the most loyal. Because they cared about each other in ways that seemed irrational to species focused on individual survival or collective efficiency. That loyalty made them unpredictable. It made them dangerous. It made them the kind of ally everyone wanted and the kind of enemy everyone feared. On Earth, at the United Nations headquarters, a new wing had been added to the building. It was called the Hall of Unity. Inside, displays showed the history of human expansion into space. The triumphs and the tragedies. The victories and the losses, the moments that defined who humanity was becoming. The centerpiece of the hall was a holographic display showing the